Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we are working with some Aerangis orchids, which are a species of orchids that I don't really feature all that often on my channel, and that's because I don't have any. I used to, a long time ago, 7 years ago. I had 2 of them. I loved them, but long story short, I lost them after a storm, and after which I just didn't have the chance to purchase any. I did have 1 or 2 of them along these years, but I didn't have much success with inorganic setups, and I kind of gave them up for a while. And behold, I have quite a few of them to work with today, and I wanted to take you along because I have a rather peculiar or maybe creative setup in mind for 2 of them. So before we start, let me remind you that you are always free to give this video a like if you do end up enjoying it, and subscribe to my channel. I post 3 times a week. And with that said, let's get to work. What should we start with? Let's start with a normal setup, and then we're gonna do the peculiar setup. Alright, so honestly, I don't know why I didn't purchase these orchids sooner, because I do love them. They're miniature orchids and they produce nighttime fragrant flowers, or at least some of them. I did have one of them flower for me. It was beautiful, it just didn't have a fragrance. And the flowers are typically white, but they are produced on this massive flower spike, which can become quite impressive. So what is there not to like, right? Here we have the Aerangis somalensis. This has a little bit of a history. I purchased this one a few months ago, and as I told you before, I do seem to have quite a lot of issues with transport by post, by standard post. So this orchid spent a month and a little bit on transport, and when I received it, the top leaf, the newest leaf, actually grew in the box without any type of light, and it was so pale. It did not have any chlorophyll at all. The thing that saved this orchid was the fact that it was packed wet, and somehow, through some sort of miracle, it did not rot. However, though, this one survived on that moisture, and look at her today. The leaf completely greened up because I did provide light, so she started to allocate chlorophyll in this leaf, and the color now is quite normal and healthy. Bonus, I do see another leaf sprouting from the center, so I think this orchid is absolutely fine after a month and a week or so on transport. During summertime, I didn't mention this, but it was very hot. Now, if you search some pictures with Aerangises, or how is the plural? Is it Aerangi? It sounds a little incorrect, but kind of correct at the same time. I'm sure it's not Aerangi, but it sounds cool, right? So the point was, if you look at pictures on the internet with these orchids, you will find them leaning over the pot pretty much like Phalaenopsis. They are monopodial orchids, even though they're not related to Phalaenopsis. They're also epiphytic orchids, by the way. However, this one does not seem to grow that way. In pictures, I see it growing upright. So for this one, I'm not gonna do the cookie setup. I'm gonna do a normal repotting, but I really wanted to show you this orchid too because she is a survivor. I will nickname her Schrodinger's orchid. It already started to grow root tips. How cool is that? So yeah, this orchid will be just fine. So for this orchid, I'm going with a transparent tiny little pot. It's an 8 centimeter diameter one. I am not even going to bother putting some aeration slits. At this size, they're not necessary for me in this climate, so I'm just gonna make sure that the medium is airy and fluffy. Other than that, is just my typical repotting routine: sphagnum moss at the bottom, bark in between, and as a top layer, bark. And here we go, I'm all done. The orchid is potted. I watered it very well and placed it in this red decorative container. And oh my goodness, don't I love this contrast of the beautiful green with red. How about that? But this color, it wouldn't contrast that well, right? But with red, I love it. All right, so now let's get to the interesting setups. As for these 2 Aerangises, Aerangi, I swear it sounds legit. I'm sure it's not correct, but it sounds cute. So this is the fastuosa, which is actually the very first species that I ever purchased 7 years ago. And here we have the Kirky. With these ones, can we see the difference? Both of them are leaning. They look like Phalaenopsis in their growth pattern, let's say. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if I would find a sort of pot which is not really upright, it's not really horizontal either because all of the medium would fall, but it's kind of slanted. So I searched the internet. Of course, I found some options that I might pursue in the future, but chance would have it that I stumbled upon some products that I thought I would use and I never did, in the shape of these IKEA little spice jars. And would you look at that, you can put them vertical, but you can also put them on their side. And don't they actually look a little bit like the glass globe that I used for my Aerangis orchid? They kind of do. So I'm gonna try a cookie setup. I think you all know where this is going. So first of all, I need to unmount this orchid really quick, and I'm starting with the fastuosa because she looks like the easier one to unmount. There we go. The roots weren't actually attached to the mount. I see that the other one does have some attached roots. So let's just remove this sphagnum moss, which looks pretty old. Alright, so I unmounted the orchid and cut away all of the dead roots. I didn't have many dead roots. Now it's time to prepare the medium in the jar. And you would not believe it, but I'm gonna use the same technique that I use for the pots, because in essence, it's really not much of a difference. But one of the major differences is that your hand cannot really reach inside, so I'm gonna use my long-nosed tweezers. And I will start with a layer of sphagnum moss on the bottom. And to be frank, most of this medium will actually be sphagnum moss. Then I will place the orchid roots inside. Not all of the roots will be inside the medium, but that is okay as long as I can actually stabilize the orchid inside. And right now I'm wondering if I can do that. I think I might need more medium, and for that I'm gonna need to add in some bark. One thing to note is that, oops, on the sides, the sphagnum moss will accumulate algae. So as much as possible, I will try to arrange the bark tips on the side of the pot, well, the jar. I will leave the sphagnum moss on the bottom because there's no light here. Chances of algae are not so high, but as much as possible, the sides of the jar, I will try to make sure that they're covered with bark. Okay, now let's do a little bit of a trick. Let's envelop the root system in sphagnum moss. This will act as an anchor, hopefully. All right, well, I don't really like this. So I don't think I'm gonna do this anymore. But you know what? It was a valiant attempt. You have to try stuff to know if you like them or not, right? I don't like this, but I did have in mind a way to water it. And to water it, you just put water as much as to make the medium moist because you have the sphagnum moss, or if you don't know how to do that, you can just soak it and then dump the water as much as you can, and that would have worked great. But to be honest, I thought it would look different, but it doesn't, and I don't like it. So I'm gonna go for the traditional potting style, which is the upright pot, but this is a good idea for different plants. It's okay though, I'm still going to post this video because it's part of the hobby. You try out stuff and you realize you don't like it, so you give it up and start over. Yep, much better. Alrighty, let's do the Kirky really fast too. And we're done. I liked the contrast between the green and the red so much that I decided to pot the other ones in whatever red containers I had around the greenhouse, and I really like it. So you'll have to excuse the monstrosity that I showed you earlier. Quite atrocious, if I do say so myself. However, it does teach us an important lesson, and that is you have to try out stuff. If you think it's gonna look good, try it out, see if you like it, and if you don't, then try something else, no harm done. And since we're on the subject about setups and medium, you can't actually go for whatever type of medium you envision. But I will reiterate my 3 golden rules when it comes to medium and setups, especially for epiphytic orchids, but not only, terrestrials and semi-terrestrials as well. First of all, you need to make sure that the roots have air. In the case of epiphytic orchid, you need a little bit more aeration. Obviously, you don't use heavy soils. In the case of terrestrial orchids, loose soils, fluffy soils, put that perlite there just to make sure that the roots don't get suffocated. Second rule, you have to be able to provide water. If you have an enclosed setup in which you cannot put water in, then that's not gonna work, right? Orchids need water. But if you can provide water, that's okay. And since the first rule is you need to provide air to the roots, then you will not actually suffocate the roots with water because you need to provide air and water at the same time. That's why rule number 1 is air, not water. And rule number 3 is find a medium which is not causing damage to the orchid roots, chemically and physically. Of course, we're not gonna put in very abrasive materials there that can physically damage the roots. Also, not something that can leach out substances which will harm the roots, or something that will alter water parameters in such a way that it will be damaging to the orchid. For example, if you have a medium which raises the pH to 9, that's not going to be great for the orchid because it will not be able to absorb nutrients. Other than that, the sky's the limit. If you have those 3 things down, you can try whatever setup crosses your mind, really. But for now, that's about it on the Aerangis. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!